The shattered glass, a constellation of sharp, glittering fragments across the worn wooden floor, was the first thing I registered, not the blood, not the strangled sob ripping through the sudden suffocating silence. It was the way the cheap amber-colored bottle of whiskey, the one we'd shared countless nights, lay broken, its contents staining the faded rug like a dark, accusing wound. Liam, usually a fortress of quiet strength, was crumpled against the kitchen counter, his shoulders heaving, a sound I'd never heard him make. It wasn't the violence of the fall, the way his hand had swept the bottle off the counter in a raw, uncontrolled motion that shocked me. It was the whisper barely audible, lost in the echo of the shattering glass, a name not mine, but a name that belonged to a ghost from his past, a name laced with a raw, aching tenderness that made my own heart clench. I'd always known there was a shadow, a history he kept locked away, but I'd never imagined it was this potent, this visceral. I'd built a world around us, a fragile, beautiful thing, convinced that his quiet love was a sanctuary, a refuge from the storms of our pasts. But in that single, fractured moment, the illusion shattered, revealing the fault lines beneath our carefully constructed reality. It wasn't just the name, it was the way his voice broke, the sheer, unadulterated pain that radiated from him, a pain that wasn't for me, wasn't about me. For months, years even, I thought his eyes held mine with a steadfast devotion, a silent promise. But the truth, raw and brutal, was that those eyes in that moment were seeing someone else, a phantom etched in the depths of his soul. The realization didn't hit me like a hammer blow, but like a slow, insidious poison seeping into my veins, chilling me from the inside out. I remember the way the kitchen light, a harsh, unforgiving glare, reflected off the broken glass, turning the amber liquid into a pool of dark, swirling secrets. I remember the way my own breath hitched, a silent, desperate plea for something, anything, to make sense. And then the second twist, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. I saw not Liam's reflection, but a photograph half hidden behind a spice rack, a faded, sepia-toned image of two boys, young, laughing, their hands intertwined. One of them was Liam, but the other, the boy whose name he'd whispered, wasn't a ghost, wasn't a memory. He was real, tangible, and looking back at me with a smile that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He was, I realized with a sickening lurch, the man Liam had loved first, the man who'd shaped the contours of his heart, the man who'd taught him how to love, a love that was, even now, echoing in the broken fragments of our own. The name, the whisper, it wasn't a lament, it was a declaration. The photograph, a relic of a time before me, before us, became a silent accusation, a tangible representation of the love I could never fully possess. It wasn't just a picture, it was a testament, a physical manifestation of a bond that predated my existence, a bond that in that shattering moment felt infinitely stronger than anything we had built. I stood there frozen, the silence in the kitchen amplifying the frantic beating of my heart, each pulse a painful reminder of my own inadequacy. Liam, still slumped against the counter, hadn't noticed my gaze, hadn't seen the way my world was crumbling around me. He was lost, adrift in a sea of memories, his face etched with a longing that made my own throat ache. I wanted to scream, to rage, to shatter the remaining fragments of the whiskey bottle, to break the silence with the raw, untamed fury that was building inside me. But I couldn't. I was trapped, paralyzed by the sheer, overwhelming weight of the truth. The man in the photograph, the boy with the laughing eyes, his name was Daniel, a name Liam had spoken with a reverence that made my own name sound like a hollow echo. It wasn't just the name, it was the way it rolled off his tongue, a soft, almost reverent whisper, a sound that spoke of a love that was both tender and fierce, a love that had left an indelible mark on his soul. I remembered the way Liam had always flinched when I'd tried to delve too deeply into his past, the way he'd always steered the conversation away from his childhood, his teenage years. I'd attributed it to a general reticence, a quiet nature. But now the pieces were falling into place, revealing a picture I'd been too blind to see. He hadn't been guarded, he'd been protecting a sacred space, a sanctuary of memories that belonged to someone else. And then another twist, a subtle shift in Liam's posture. He wasn't just grieving, he was remembering, reliving a moment, a memory so vivid, so real that it brought him to his knees. He began to speak, his voice a low, broken murmur, not to me but to the ghost in his mind. He spoke of stolen glances, of whispered promises, of a love that bloomed in the shadows, a love that was forbidden, a love that was, in its own way, perfect. He spoke of a summer, a lake, a shared secret, a kiss that tasted of salt and longing. He spoke of a goodbye, a forced separation, a promise to meet again, a promise that was never kept. And then the final devastating blow. He spoke of Daniel's death, a sudden tragic accident that had ripped him away, leaving Liam with nothing but the echoes of a love that could never be. It wasn't just a lost love, it was a love that had been violently extinguished, a love that had left a gaping wound in his heart, a wound that, even after all these years, refused to heal. The name, the whisper, it wasn't a declaration of a lingering affection. It was a lament, a desperate cry for a love that was lost forever. The realization shifted everything. My anger, my jealousy, my fear, all of it dissolved, replaced by a wave of grief so profound that it threatened to drown me. I wasn't fighting for his love, I was fighting against a ghost, a memory that was more powerful than anything I could ever offer. The grief that washed over me wasn't just for Liam or for Daniel, but for the fragile illusion I'd clung to, the belief that our love was unique, unparalleled, a force capable of conquering any shadow. It was a grief for the naive hope that I could fill the void left by a love so profound, so devastatingly lost. I watched Liam, his body still trembling, his face buried in his hands, and I understood with a clarity that pierced my soul that I was a consolation prize, a second chance, a pale imitation of a love that had burned too brightly, too briefly. I wasn't the love of his life, I was the love that came after, the love that tried to pick up the pieces, the love that was always measured against a memory. The kitchen, once a place of shared meals and whispered secrets, now felt like a tomb, a cold, sterile space where the ghosts of the past danced in the shadows. I wanted to reach out to comfort him, to tell him that it was okay to grieve, that it was okay to remember, but the words caught in my throat, choked by the weight of my own inadequacy. I was a spectator in his grief, an outsider looking in, a stranger in my own home. And then another twist, a flicker of recognition in Liam's eyes. He looked up, his gaze meeting mine, and for a moment I saw not the grief-stricken man consumed by the past, but the Liam I knew, the man who had held me close, who had whispered words of comfort, who had made me believe in the possibility of love. But the recognition was fleeting, a brief flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. His eyes, still filled with tears, held a question, a silent plea for understanding, a desperate hope that I could somehow bridge the chasm that had opened between us. He spoke, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper, and for a moment I thought he was going to say my name, to offer me a lifeline, a way back from the precipice. But he didn't. He spoke of Daniel, of the way his laughter had filled a room, of the way his smile had lit up his world, of the way his touch had felt like coming home. He spoke of a love that was pure, unadulterated, a love that had been stolen too soon. And then the final, crushing blow. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a raw, aching honesty, and he said, "I loved him more than I ever thought possible." It wasn't a confession, it was a declaration, a statement of fact, a truth that hung in the air like a death knell. The name, the whisper, it wasn't a lament or a declaration, it was a simple, brutal truth, a truth that shattered the last vestiges of my hope. I realized then with a chilling certainty that I wasn't just competing with a ghost. I was competing with a legend, a love story that had been etched in his heart with an indelible ink, a story that would forever cast a shadow over our own. The love he had for Daniel wasn't a memory, it was a part of him, an essential element of his being, a force that shaped his present and dictated his future. My love, in comparison, felt like a fleeting whisper, a fragile echo in the grand symphony of his past. The weight of his confession, "I loved him more than I ever thought possible," settled upon me like a shroud, suffocating any remaining hope. It wasn't just the words, but the raw, unadulterated honesty with which they were spoken, a truth so profound that it rendered any argument, any plea utterly futile. I stood there, a silent witness to his grief, a spectator in a love story that wasn't mine, a love story that had ended in tragedy, leaving behind a ghost that haunted his every waking moment. The kitchen, once a symbol of our shared life, now felt like a battleground, a place where the past and present collided, where the echoes of a lost love drowned out the whispers of our own. I wanted to scream, to shatter the silence with the raw, untamed fury that was building inside me. I wanted to shake him, to force him to see me, to acknowledge my presence, to recognize the love I had offered him, the love that was being slowly, irrevocably crushed beneath the weight of his memories. But I couldn't. I was trapped, paralyzed by the sheer, overwhelming weight of his grief, a grief that was so palpable, so real that it felt like a physical force, pushing me away, isolating me in my own despair. And then another twist, a subtle shift in his demeanor. He wasn't just grieving, he was remembering, reliving a moment, a memory so vivid, so real that it brought a faint smile to his lips. He spoke of a time when they were young, reckless, and free, a time when their love was a secret, a stolen moment in the shadows, a whispered promise in the dark. He spoke of a summer night, a bonfire on the beach, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the taste of salt on his lips, the feel of Daniel's hand in his. He spoke of a love that was pure, unadulterated, a love that had been stolen too soon. And then the final, devastating blow. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a raw, aching honesty, and he said, he saw me, truly saw me in a way no one else ever has. It wasn't a comparison, it was a declaration, a statement of fact, a truth that hung in the air like a death knell. The name, the whisper, it wasn't a lament or a declaration, it was a simple, brutal truth, a truth that shattered the last vestiges of my hope. I realized then with a chilling certainty that I wasn't just competing with a ghost. I was competing with a legend, a love story that had been etched in his heart with an indelible ink, a story that would forever cast a shadow over our own. The love he had for Daniel wasn't a memory, it was a part of him, an essential element of his being, a force that shaped his present and dictated his future. My love, in comparison, felt like a fleeting whisper, a fragile echo in the grand symphony of his past. I was a footnote, a postscript, a love that came after, a love that was always measured against a memory that could never be surpassed. I was a consolation, a comfort, a placeholder, until the day he could join Daniel in the place that only memories could reach. I understood then with a heartbreaking clarity that he loved me in his own way, a way that was tinged with sorrow, a way that was forever bound to the ghost of a love that had been lost too soon. The realization that I was a love born of grief, a love perpetually measured against a ghost, wasn't a sudden epiphany, but a slow, agonizing unraveling of the carefully woven tapestry of our relationship. The kitchen, once a sanctuary of shared meals and whispered intimacies, now felt like a mausoleum, a cold, echoing space where the specter of Daniel's love reigned supreme. Liam's words, he saw me, truly saw me in a way no one else ever has, weren't a condemnation but a heartbreaking truth, a testament to a connection that transcended time and death. I wasn't just a replacement, I was an echo, a faint resonance of a love that had been violently silenced. And in that silence I heard the unspoken truth. Liam loved me, yes, but it was a love filtered through the prism of loss, a love that carried the weight of a forever unfulfilled promise. I watched him, his face etched with a quiet sorrow, and I understood with a chilling clarity that our love story wasn't a standalone narrative, but a sequel, a continuation of a story that had ended too soon. And then another twist, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his gaze. He looked at me not with the grief-stricken eyes of a man lost in the past, but with a flicker of something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't love, not the kind I had yearned for, but something akin to gratitude, a quiet acknowledgement of my presence, my patience, my unwavering support. He spoke, his voice barely a whisper, and for a moment I held my breath, hoping against hope that he would finally see me, truly see me beyond the shadow of his past, but he didn't. He spoke of the day he realized that even in the midst of his grief, even with the constant ache of Daniel's absence, he could still feel something, something that resembled love, something that was uniquely ours. He spoke of the day he realized that even though Daniel would always be a part of him, he could still build a life, a future with me. And then the final, devastating blow, the twist that shattered everything I thought I knew. He said, "The day I realized I loved you was the day I realized I could finally let him go." It wasn't a declaration of my worth, but a confession of his healing, a testament to his ability to move on, not from Daniel, but from the suffocating grip of his grief. The love he felt for me wasn't a love born of desire, but a love born of necessity, a love that was a stepping stone, a bridge to a future where he could finally reconcile with his past. He loved me because he needed to, because I was the key to unlocking the chains that bound him to a ghost. The title, "The Day He Realized He Loved Me Was the Best Moment of My Life," wasn't a celebration of our love, but a testament to his liberation. My love, my presence, it was a tool, a means to an end. I was the catalyst, the spark that ignited his healing, the instrument that allowed him to finally lay Daniel's memory to rest. He loved me not because I was the love of his life, but because I was the love that allowed him to live again. My best moment was not about me, but about him.